Commander Ralvex stood in the observation chamber, his 6 luminous eyes fixed on the holographic battlefield below. The arena was a perfect simulation of a war-torn landscape, designed to test combat efficiency. The Saltharians, his kind, were known for their unmatched strategy, guided by the most advanced AI in the galaxy. Their tactics were flawless, their precision absolute. And yet, something strange was happening. The human team was winning. Ralvex shifted uncomfortably. This was supposed to be an easy demonstration, a way to educate the humans on the superiority of Saltharian tactics. Instead, the humans had turned the battle into something unpredictable, something chaotic. At the center of the madness was Captain Elias Carter, a human officer with a reputation for being unorthodox. He barked commands with a confidence that made no sense, using improvised signals instead of pre-programmed battle strategies. His soldiers responded with swift, reckless movements that seemed illogical. The Saltharian eye struggled to adapt. Ralvex clenched his claws. "Explain this," he demanded, his voice sharp. A nearby Saltharian analyst hesitated. Their movements do not align with optimal strategic patterns. Their formation shifts unpredictably. They are not following a calculated sequence. Then how are they winning? Ralvex's voice rose slightly. He rarely raised his voice. He never needed to. Precision solved everything. The analyst's tentacles twitched. "We do not know." Ralvex's gaze locked onto Carter. The human had set up decoys, misleading the eye-controlled forces into targeting empty positions. Then, in a swift maneuver, he and his team had flanked the Saltharians, striking before the AI could adjust. The humans fought with instinct. They fought with madness. And it was working. The illogical victory. Minutes later, the battle was over. The simulation flickered off, leaving Carter and his team standing tall, victorious. The Saltharian squad, despite their perfect calculations, had lost. Ralvex descended from the observation platform. As he approached Carter, he took in the human's appearance, sweat glistening on his forehead, his uniform slightly disheveled, a wide grin on his face. He looked like a being who had enjoyed every moment of that battle. "Captain Carter," Ralvex said, his tone carefully neutral. "That was unconventional." Carter laughed, a deep, rich sound. "That's one way to put it, Commander." Ralvex studied him. "You ignored strategic models, abandoned AI predictions, and refused to optimize efficiency. And yet you won. How?" Carter tilted his head. "Because war isn't just numbers and calculations, Commander. It's about reading the battlefield, adapting to chaos, and sometimes going with your gut." "Going with your gut," Ralvex repeated, confused. Carter chuckled. "Instinct, a feeling, something no AI can truly replicate." Ralvex's mandibles twitched. "Illogical." "And yet," Carter said, smiling, "it worked." Ralvex had no response. The fascination begins. That night, Ralvex found himself reviewing the battle data. Again and again, he analyzed every movement, every action taken by the humans. None of it should have worked. And yet it had. His mind raced with questions. Could instinct truly be superior to calculated precision? Was unpredictability an advantage? As he watched Carter's confident smirk on the recorded battle footage, a strange feeling stirred within him. A mixture of curiosity, frustration, and something else. For the first time in his life, Commander Ralvex felt intrigued by the illogical nature of humanity, and he needed to understand it. Commander Ralvex had always believed in logic. Strategy was a science, and war was an equation with only one correct answer. Every decision should be calculated, every movement planned. But now, as he reviewed the battle simulation footage once more, he found himself questioning everything he knew. The humans had won. It wasn't luck. It wasn't a mistake. It was something else. Something dangerous and unpredictable. Ralvex's 6 eyes locked onto Captain Elias Carter. the human officer who had led his team to victory. His chaotic tactics had outmaneuvered the most advanced AI in the galaxy. How? Commander, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Analyst Verlan, his most trusted strategist. Another simulation is scheduled tomorrow. The humans have accepted the challenge. Relvex straightened. This was his chance to prove that logic would always triumph over instinct. Prepare the strongest AI-assisted strategy we have, he ordered. I will personally oversee the battle. Verlan hesitated. Do you believe they will fight the same way again? Relvex's mandibles twitched. Of course. They have only one way to win, chaos. But chaos can be controlled. Or so he thought. The second simulation begins. The next day, Relvex stood in the observation chamber once more. The battlefield was different. An abandoned city, with tall ruined buildings, narrow streets, and plenty of places to hide. Carter and his team moved into position. On the other side, the Saltharian squad stood tall, their every movement guided by an advanced AI system. The moment the battle began, Relvex saw the difference. His soldiers moved with perfect coordination, their formation shifting in flawless synchronization. Their rifles fired in precise bursts, guided by predictive algorithms. The humans, by contrast, looked messy. Their movements were erratic. Some soldiers ran in zigzags, others took cover in unpredictable locations. They shouted to each other, sometimes abandoning one plan entirely to try another. It was madness. Yet, the madness worked. Relvex's claws tightened as he watched Carter's wild strategies unfold. The strategy of the unpredictable. Carter's soldiers used hit-and-run tactics. They baited the AI-controlled forces into ambushes. They set decoys, making it appear as if they were in one place, only to attack from another. The Saltharians tried to counter them with precision, but every time the AI adapted, the humans changed the game. This is impossible, Verlan whispered. The AI should be reacting in real time. Why is it failing? Relvex did not answer. He was too focused on Carter. The human was not just fighting. He was dancing. Every step, every action, every smirk. It was as if Carter was leading an invisible rhythm, a pattern that could not be read. A trap was set for him. He avoided it effortlessly. A sniper took aim. He was already gone before the shot was fired. Relvex had never seen anything like it, and for the first time in his life, he felt something unexpected. Admiration. The turning point. As the battle reached its peak, Carter did something that left the entire observation deck in stunned silence. He ordered his entire squad to retreat. Confused, the AI-controlled forces pushed forward, believing victory was near. Then, suddenly, an explosion. The humans had led the Saltharians into a massive trap. Buildings collapsed, streets turned into fire-filled choke points, and confusion spread through the AI ranks. Impossible, Verlan gasped. Relvex watched in silence. Carter had planned this from the beginning. He had baited the AI, led them where he wanted, and struck at the perfect moment. It was not random. It was not luck. It was art. And it worked. The aftermath. The battle ended in another human victory. The simulation shut down, and Carter stood tall once more, grinning like a predator who had just finished the hunt. Relvex stepped forward, his claws clicking against the floor. Captain Carter. Carter turned, raising an eyebrow. Ah, Commander. Enjoy the show. Relvex's voice was slow, careful. This was not random. Carter smirked. Of course not. You planned all of this. Carter nodded. War isn't about numbers, Commander. It's about knowing your enemy. AI is predictable. You tried to control chaos. But humans don't control chaos. We become it. Relvex exhaled. This human, this species, they were dangerous. And yet, deep inside his cold, logical mind, he felt something he had never felt before. Excitement. I wish to learn, Relvex said suddenly. Carter raised an eyebrow. Learn what? Ralvex's mandibles twitched. How to dance in chaos. Carter grinned. Now you're speaking my language. Commander Ralvex had never been this disturbed before. Not by war, not by loss, not even by facing the unknown. But this human, Captain Elias Carter, he disturbed him. For days, Ralvex had analyzed every second of the last battle simulation. He had tried to dissect Carter's strategies, hoping to find a pattern. But there was no pattern. Or rather, the pattern was something completely illogical. And yet, it worked. Ralvex didn't know whether to feel frustrated or fascinated. A meeting of minds. I wish to understand, Ralvex said. Carter leaned back in his chair, smirking. The two sat inside a small strategy room aboard the Galactic Concord station. The walls displayed tactical maps, past battle simulations, and war theory holograms. You want to understand what exactly, Commander? Carter asked, crossing his arms. Ralvex's mandibles twitched slightly, a rare sign of irritation. Your methods. Your instinct-driven warfare. Your unpredictability. Carter chuckled. Instinct isn't something you just learn, Ralvex. It's something you feel. Ralvex frowned. Feelings have no place in strategy. Carter shook his head. That's your problem. You Soltharians rely too much on logic and probability. But war isn't just numbers, Commander. It's chaos. And chaos can't be predicted. Ralvex stared at him. And yet, you use chaos. Carter's grin widened. Exactly. A lesson in instinct. Carter tapped the table. Let's start with something simple. A holographic chessboard appeared between them. Ralvex had studied human chess before. It was a primitive but effective strategy game. Chess is predictable, Ralvex stated. It follows fixed rules. Carter shrugged. Sure, but just because something has rules doesn't mean it's simple. He made the first move. Ralvex followed, playing by perfect strategic patterns. But Carter, he played recklessly. At least, that's what it seemed like. Ralvex noticed something strange. Carter sacrificed pieces carelessly, making moves that seemed suicidal. And yet, each move was leading to something bigger. 5 minutes later, Carter grinned. Checkmate. Ralvex froze. His mandibles twitched again. Impossible. He should have won. His strategy had been flawless. And yet, Carter had tricked him. This is nonsense, Ralvex muttered. Carter laughed. No, this is how you win wars. The unpredictable mind. Ralvex sat in deep thought. You intentionally make bad moves to create a greater advantage. Carter leaned forward. Exactly. Sacrifices, distractions, deception. Soltharians play war like a game of perfect numbers. Humans, we play war like chess. Every loss is a step toward victory. Ralvex's mind raced. If that were true, it meant humans fought in a way no AI could ever understand. It wasn't randomness. It was controlled madness. And it was terrifyingly effective. A dangerous question. Ralvex stood up. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. This method of yours, it is powerful, but it is also dangerous. Carter smirked. War is dangerous, Commander. Ralvex hesitated before asking, have humans always fought like this? Carter's grin faded slightly. He exhaled. Always. Ralvex's claws tapped against the table. And this is why you win. Carter nodded. It's why we survive. Ralvex stared at him for a long moment. Then, finally, he spoke. Teach me. Carter's grin returned. Now that is the most interesting thing I've heard all day. Commander Ralvex had always considered himself an excellent strategist. He had studied the greatest Soltharian war campaigns, memorized thousands of battle formations, and perfected simulations that no other species could defeat. And yet this human, Elias Carter, had proven him wrong. Now, standing inside a combat training room aboard the Galactic Concord station, Ralvex prepared for something he had never done before. He was going to learn from a human. Breaking the rules. Carter paced in front of him, his hands casually tucked behind his back. All right, Commander, let's start simple. What's the first rule of Soltharian combat? Ralvex straightened. Efficiency. Every move must be calculated to maximize effect with the least amount of risk. Carter nodded. Good. Now forget that. Ralvex blinked. Excuse me. Carter grinned. You heard me. Forget efficiency. The moment you start following patterns, you become predictable. And predictability. That's a death sentence. Ralvex's mandibles twitched. Predictability ensures order. Chaos leads to loss of control. Carter clapped his hands together. Exactly. Now you're getting it. Ralvex paused. I am. Carter smirked. Yep. You just admitted that chaos is uncontrollable. And if something can't be controlled, neither can you. That's your first lesson, Commander. Ralvex processed this. It felt wrong. And yet, he couldn't deny what he had seen in the simulations. The illogical had worked. Maybe it was time to try it himself. A lesson in unpredictability. Carter pulled up a holographic battle scenario. It showed two squads positioned on opposite ends of a battlefield. One side, the Soltharians, moved in perfect formation, sticking to a flawless defensive strategy. The other side, the human team, was scattered, constantly moving, attacking from unpredictable angles. Carter gestured toward the display. If you were leading the Soltharians, what would you do? Ralvex studied the map. I would fortify defenses and predict their likely attack points. Carter shook his head. Wrong. Ralvex frowned. Explain. Carter smirked. The moment you set up defenses, you limit your options. You force yourself into a fixed position, and once that happens, the enemy has already won. Ralvex's eyes narrowed. Then what is the correct move? Carter pointed to the Soltharian forces. Break the formation. Spread out. Move unpredictably. Don't react to the enemy. Force them to react to you. Ralvex froze. His entire life, he had been taught the opposite. Control the battlefield. Control the enemy. But Carter was suggesting something insane. What you're describing is madness. Carter grinned. No, Commander. It's called freedom. The combat test. Carter didn't give him time to argue. Instead, he tossed Ralvex a combat knife. Ralvex caught it, examining the primitive weapon with mild distaste. This is a simple tool. Yep, Carter said. Now try to hit me. Ralvex lunged. It should have been easy. He was faster, stronger, and had trained in close-quarters combat for years. His movements were precise. And yet, he missed. Carter dodged effortlessly, slipping to the side in a way that made no sense. He didn't move like a trained warrior. He moved like a wild animal, adapting without hesitation. Ralvex swung again. Carter ducked. He attacked from another angle. Carter twisted away at the last second. None of this should be working. Ralvex was fighting with logic. Carter was fighting with instinct. And instinct was winning. Then, in a blur, Carter countered. He swept Ralvex's legs, causing the commander to stumble. A moment later, Carter's knife was at his throat. Ralvex froze. Carter smirked. Lesson 2. Don't be predictable. A new understanding. Ralvex sat in silence, processing what had just happened. He had fought perfectly, and yet he had lost. Again. Carter sat across from him, leaning back in his chair. I can see that look on your face. You're thinking, how did I lose? I did everything right. Ralvex's mandibles twitched. Correct. Carter grinned. That's the thing, Commander. War isn't about doing things right. It's about doing whatever it takes to win. Ralvex exhaled slowly. So your advantage is unpredictability. Carter shook his head. No. Our advantage is that we never stop adapting. Ralvex fell silent. That was the real lesson. The best strategy wasn't a fixed one. It was one that could change at any moment. And that made humans the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Relvex finally spoke. I wish to continue learning. Carter grinned. Good. Because lesson 3. That's the fun one. Relvex tilted his head. What is it? Carter's eyes gleamed. Surprise your enemy before they surprise you. Relvex knew, at that moment, that his world was about to change forever. Commander Relvex had spent his entire life perfecting the art of strategy. He had studied wars, memorized tactics, and led countless simulated battles. He believed that knowledge and planning were the keys to victory. And yet, here he was, learning from a human who claimed that the best way to win a battle was to throw away the plan. Now standing in the training arena aboard the Galactic Concord station, Relvex prepared for lesson 3. Carter stood across from him, holding a training pistol. All right, Commander. Tell me what you know about surprise attacks. Relvex straightened. Surprise is a temporary advantage. It is useful for disrupting enemy formations, but does not guarantee victory. Carter grinned. See, that's where you're wrong. Relvex's mandibles twitched in irritation. Explain. Carter held up a single finger. Surprise isn't just an advantage, it's a weapon. If you use it correctly, it's the most powerful thing in your arsenal. Relvex crossed his arms. I do not see how that is possible. Carter smirked. Then let me show you. The unseen strike. Carter set up a combat simulation. The holographic battlefield showed an open landscape, flat, clear, and without cover. Relvex analyzed it immediately. This battlefield favors long-range combat. The best strategy would be to establish a strong defensive position. Carter nodded. Yep, that's exactly what your enemy would think too. Relvex frowned. You suggest doing the opposite? Carter grinned. Bingo. With a tap on the control panel, Carter activated the simulation. 2 teams of holographic soldiers appeared. One side, the Xaltharians, moved into perfect defensive positions. They set up turrets, created firing lines, and waited for the enemy to approach. The other side, the human team, vanished. Relvex's eyes narrowed. Where did they go? Carter leaned in. Exactly. A few moments later, chaos erupted. The Xaltharians expected an open battle, but instead, the humans attacked from underground tunnels that had been hidden beneath the battlefield. Explosions tore through the defensive lines. The enemy tried to react, but before they could adjust, the humans had already moved again. The battle ended in minutes. The Xaltharians never even saw their attackers. Relvex stared at the screen. This is deception. Carter shrugged. Call it what you want. I call it being smarter than your enemy. A practical test. Carter didn't give Relvex time to think. Instead, he threw a training pistol at him. Relvex caught it. What is this for? Carter grinned. We're gonna do a live test. You versus me. Relvex tilted his head. You wish to engage in combat. Carter smirked. Oh, it's not just combat, Commander. It's a surprise test. Relvex barely had time to react before Carter vanished. One moment, he was there. The next, he was gone. Relvex's instincts kicked in. He moved cautiously, scanning his surroundings. The room was a closed training area, nowhere to hide. And yet Carter was nowhere to be seen. Relvex's claw tightened around the pistol. This is foolishness, he muttered. You cannot disappear in an empty room. Then, a voice from behind. You sure about that? Relvex spun around too late. Carter tagged him with a training shot to the chest. Simulation over. Carter won. Relvex stood frozen. He had been defeated. Again. Carter laughed, lowering his training pistol. Lesson 3, Commander. Surprise your enemy before they surprise you. Relvex exhaled slowly. How did you do that? Carter grinned. Misdirection. You expected me to attack from a logical direction, so I did the opposite. Simple. Relvex processed this. This changes everything. Carter nodded. Yep, and trust me, we're just getting started. Relvex looked at Carter, and for the first time in his life, he truly understood something. Humans didn't just fight wars. They played with their enemies like pieces on a board. And Relvex was beginning to wonder if he had been playing the wrong game all along. Commander Relvex had never questioned his way of thinking before. For years, he had followed the teachings of the Soltharian war doctrine, a philosophy built on order, precision, and control. But now, after training with Captain Elias Carter, he could feel his beliefs breaking apart. And for the first time in his life, Relvex wasn't sure if that was a bad thing. The final test begins. Carter stood in the training arena, arms crossed, watching Relvex with a knowing smirk. All right, Commander, you've learned the basics: instinct, unpredictability, and surprise. Now it's time to put everything together. Relvex straightened. What do you propose? Carter tapped a control panel, activating a new combat simulation. A holographic battlefield appeared. A vast jungle with thick trees, uneven terrain, and no clear vantage points. In the center, two opposing forces stood ready. This is your final test, Carter explained. You'll lead one side. I'll lead the other. Relvex analyzed the battlefield. Jungle terrain. This environment limits visibility and disrupts formation-based strategies. Carter grinned. Exactly. That's why it's perfect. Relvex's mandibles twitched. And what are the rules? Carter laughed. Rules? There are no rules. You win by defeating my forces. Simple. Relvex exhaled slowly. He knew this was the true test. Carter had given him all the tools. But now, could he use them? He had to find out. Battle of the Mind. The simulation began. Relvex deployed his forces using traditional tactics, securing defensive positions along the high ground. It was a textbook strategy, giving him control of the battlefield. Carter, however, did something different. Instead of forming a strong front line, his soldiers disappeared into the jungle. Relvex frowned. This was illogical. How could Carter fight if his soldiers were scattered? Then it began. Hit-and-run attacks. Sudden ambushes, silent eliminations. Every time Relvex tried to reinforce a position, his soldiers vanished. Every time he formed a defensive line, Carter's forces appeared from unexpected angles. Relvex's forces were crumbling. And suddenly, he realized, he was playing the wrong game again. Carter wasn't fighting for control. Carter was fighting to break him. Breaking the pattern. Relvex took a deep breath. He had two choices. He could continue fighting the Soltharian way, holding his ground, waiting for an opening that would never come. Or he could adapt. Relvex's claws tightened around the control panel. No more waiting. No more predictability. It was time to change the game. Relvex ordered his forces to abandon formation. They scattered into the jungle, moving in small, unpredictable units. They stopped relying on defensive positions and instead used the terrain as their weapon. When Carter's forces attacked, Relvex's soldiers were already gone. When Carter tried to flank, Relvex struck first. The tide was turning. Carter had taught him how to fight like a human. Now, Relvex was using it against him. A warrior reborn. The simulation lasted 40 minutes. Then, it ended. The result? A draw. For the first time, Relvex had fought Carter to a standstill. The room was silent. Then, Carter laughed. Now that was a fight, he said, grinning. Relvex exhaled, feeling something strange inside him. It wasn't frustration. It was satisfaction. He looked at Carter. I have changed. Carter nodded. Yeah, you have. And you know what? I think you're finally starting to get it. Relvex glanced back at the battlefield, at the chaotic yet beautiful strategy he had just used. It was not Soltharian, and yet it had worked. For the first time in his life, Ralvex realized something powerful. War was not just about control. War was about adapting, learning, and never letting your enemy understand what you would do next. And in that moment, Ralvex understood why humans were so feared. They did not follow rules. They created new ones. And now, so would he. Commander Ralvex stood in the training arena, staring at the results of his last battle simulation. A draw. For the first time, he had fought Captain Elias Carter to a standstill. He had abandoned the rigid Saltharian war doctrine and used the chaotic, unpredictable tactics that Carter had taught him. And it had worked. But now, standing across from Carter, he could see the human grinning. "You finally get it," Carter said. "But there's one last lesson." Ralvex tilted his head. "Another lesson." Carter nodded. "Yep, the most important one. Victory is never guaranteed." The lights in the training arena dimmed, and a new simulation loaded. This time, the battlefield was completely unfamiliar. Instead of a jungle or an open plain, the simulation showed a ruined city, its buildings half destroyed, smoke rising from the streets. Ralvex studied it carefully. Urban combat. This is a different kind of battlefield. Carter smirked. "Exactly. And you're going to need everything you've learned to survive." Ralvex glanced at the forces available to him. He had a small squad of soldiers, outnumbered and outgunned. Carter had twice as many troops, positioned in strong defensive locations. Ralvex frowned. "This is an unwinnable scenario." Carter shrugged. "Maybe. Maybe not." Ralvex analyzed the map again. If he followed Saltharian strategy, his only option would be to retreat. But if he thought like a human, he smiled. "Let's begin." A fight in the shadows. The battle started. Ralvex didn't move his forces directly. Instead, he spread them out, avoiding detection. His soldiers moved through damaged buildings, using the ruins as cover. Carter's forces held their positions, expecting a direct assault. But it never came. Instead, small distractions began. Fires breaking out, explosions going off in abandoned areas, drawing Carter's forces away from their defensive positions. Carter narrowed his eyes. "Ah, now you're thinking like a real strategist." Ralvex didn't respond. He was too focused. His forces did not engage immediately. They weakened Carter's troops first, isolating them, cutting off supply lines, forcing them to separate. Then, when Carter's forces were at their most disorganized, Ralvex struck. Ambushes, quick attacks, never staying in one place too long. Carter's soldiers were losing ground. For the first time, Ralvex was winning. The final trick. But then, something changed. A new alert appeared in the simulation. Reinforcements detected. Ralvex's eyes widened. Carter had set a trap. A second wave of soldiers arrived, cutting off Ralvex's forces from their escape routes. He had walked into an ambush. Ralvex's forces were now the ones surrounded. Carter smirked. "Lesson 4, Commander. Victory is never guaranteed. Even the best strategy can fail." Ralvex gritted his teeth. His instincts told him to surrender. But then, he remembered everything Carter had taught him. Adapt. Think differently. Break the rules. Ralvex exhaled. He still had one option left. Instead of trying to fight his way out, Ralvex did something Carter did not expect. He ordered his troops to fake a retreat. Carter's forces moved in for the final blow. And that's when Ralvex counterattacked. He used his remaining forces to collapse a nearby building, blocking the enemy's advance and creating a new escape route. Ralvex's forces vanished into the city ruins, disappearing into the shadows. The battle timer expired. Result: stalemate. Respect earned. The simulation ended. For a long moment, neither Ralvex nor Carter spoke. Then, Carter started laughing. "That," he said, shaking his head, "was incredible." Ralvex straightened. "I did not win." Carter grinned. "You didn't lose either." And considering what you were up against, I'd call that a victory. Ralvex exhaled. He felt something new. It wasn't just satisfaction. It was pride. He had fought a human battle and held his own. Carter extended a hand. You've got potential, Commander. Real potential. Ralvex hesitated for only a second before shaking Carter's hand. I had a good teacher. Carter chuckled. Damn right you did. As Ralvex looked at the simulation results, he realized something. He was not the same warrior he had been before. The Xaltharian war doctrine had taught him control. But humans had taught him something more valuable. To think beyond control. To expect the unexpected. To embrace chaos. And now he was ready for whatever the universe had to offer. Because he was no longer just a Xaltharian warrior.